Hey, this is Digital by Computing. We're going to go through the most common types of IT servers. So servers are what you would have in a business. You may be running some servers at home as well. If you are, super cool, different types of servers. But we're going to primarily focus on a company, on a business, on a small, medium, large size of a company, an enterprise, those sort of things. And you're just interested, well, what are the servers that people are running? You know, you've heard the term servers and you want to know, well, what are they? You know, you've heard of a web server. Is that where a website lives? Yes. So let's just go through the different types of servers. This is my top 20, right? My top 20 list of servers that I think most companies generally, most medium, large companies will have. Smaller companies may not require all of these servers, but let's just go through them now. Number one is a file server. A lot of companies have got a file servers. Essentially what the name suggests, it's a server that houses all of your files. So you would have a server, whole bunch of files on it, and then you can share it out to your company, right? People can connect to, // and then the server name and then the path, and they can access what's called SMB shares. You can set up NFS shares, CIFs, those sort of things, and you can actually house all your files on one or multiple file servers to be able to share that out with your business. So instead of having people storing, all of their publisher files, all of their Word documents that they're working on a big project, instead of storing them all on their computer, they can be storing them on a file server that is easily accessible, it's backed up, all that sort of stuff. And everybody in the company who has access can access those files as well. So you don't have to share it via emails, via Google Drive or Dropbox. You don't have to do it that way. You can dump it all on file servers and then people can access them and share them freely as well. Number two is database servers. You've probably heard of Oracle, Microsoft SQL, things like that. These are what's called, they're database software. Generally, you would call it a database server if it's running on a server. So this acts as a point for an application to perhaps store data, store metadata, store your tables, your entries, your lists, those sort of things inside a database server. All right, so this is accessible from, say, an application accesses your database server. So if we're talking about a website that's running somewhere, we'll go into websites in a second, but a website may need a database. Okay, you can install that database on its own web server somewhere, or you can install it on a database server and have the traffic talk to the database server to get the information that it needs to populate. Number three is a domain controller. Most companies that are running in a Windows sort of environment will have and will probably need some form of a domain controller. Domain controller, or let's call it an AD, an Active Directory server as well, is the server that manages a whole bunch of stuff, right? So a domain controller manages your logins. When somebody logs into a computer, you've maybe wondered this, when somebody logs into a computer and they put in their username and password, it needs to get authenticated somewhere. How do you know, how does this computer out on the network know to log in and that the password is correct? Well, it goes and queries the domain controller. The domain controller manages what's called AD as well, Active Directory. Very cool tool for managing all of your users, all of your servers, all of your computers, all in one single repository, right? You can do a whole heap of stuff within your domain controller environment. The next one is a DNS server. A lot of places may have their Active Directory, their domain controller server, also acting as a DNS server as well. A lot of guys, if you've got a larger company, may have a second DNS server or dedicated or multiple DNS servers. So essentially the point of a DNS server is to translate, right, host names to IP addresses, vice versa. You can do shortcuts for host names, for IPs, that sort of stuff as well. So what do I mean by that? When you go to www.google.com and you press enter on your browser, it doesn't just go into cyberspace and just go, oh yeah, Google's sitting over here. Behind that, there's actually an IP address. And behind that, there's actually a DNS server somewhere that's translating that host name into the IP address, okay? So that's essentially what a DNS server does. It's a bit more complicated than that. It can do a few other things as well. We're not going to go into too much detail, but in a nutshell, that's what it does. So when I access a particular server, I know that my server is called, server 01, but it's actually IP address 192.168.0.30, right? The DNS translates that between the two, okay? In a nutshell. DHCP server. This is the service that is responsible for dishing out the IPs out onto your network, okay? You've got what's called static and dynamic setups on your network card. So if you've got a Windows, a Mac computer, or a Linux box, you go and configure your network settings. You may just have there automatically detect IP, right? If you do have that, when you plug that computer into a network, the first thing it's going to try to do is going to try to find a DHCP server or some sort of service that is giving out IP addresses, right? So it's going to go out into the network and say, hey, can I get an IP from you? Can I get an IP from you? Can I get an IP from you? When it hits a DHCP server, DHCP says, yep, here is your IP address, and it'll give it an IP address. That is the simplest way to describe a DHCP server. DHCP also gives it the IP of the router, the gateway, of the DNS servers, those sort of things. So if you open up your computer's network configuration and you want to know what your IP address is, you want to know what your DNS is, unless you've statically put those in and manually put in 192.168 in there, the chances are that there's a DHCP server somewhere out on the network giving you the IP address, okay? The server as well can also be a physical hardware device, such as a router. So a lot of common household routers and modems and that sort of thing, so your home router, your modem, is probably acting as a DHCP server, right? If you go into your router, have a look and see if you can find DHCP in there. If you can, that's probably what's giving your computer its IP address. Web servers, so we touched on this before. Web servers, as the name suggests, host your website, right? So when you access www.google.com, it's going out onto the internet. It doesn't live out in the cloud. It's not in cyberspace. It's not like in some physical cloud somewhere out in the world, right? It is actually a physical server sitting somewhere, which we will call a web server. Web server houses the website. You've got tools such as Microsoft's IIS. You've got things like Apache. You've got other services that essentially host your websites and present those websites out onto the internet. A lot more complicated than that. It's not as easy as just setting up a website and putting it on a server and expecting it to work. There's a lot of stuff you have to do in the background. You have to get an IP address. You have to get a host name. You have to get some ports open. You have to get some hosting. Not some hosting. You've got to get like a provider somewhere out on the internet. You may want to get SSL certificates for it, all that sort of stuff. We won't go through too much of that, but web servers, a lot of companies have them. A lot of companies may not even have web servers locally. They could be hosting them elsewhere. So that the company, for example, may have the file servers and the domain controller and things, but may have the web server somewhere else because they want somebody else to control those and they want them separate from their network. One thing you'll find is a lot of websites are generally in what's called the DMZ because you want them outside of your normal network. You want those access to the internet, but you don't want the internet to access anything else on your network. So they can generally be in what's called a DMZ or a DMZ for all your Americans out there. A mail server. An email server houses your mail, right? An exchange server. Okay, you've probably heard of an exchange server. That is a mail server. So this is a server that manages all of your internet mail, right? Your mail, your external mail going out and in, your mail within the company. It does your routes of your mails, it does your forwards, it manages your mailboxes, it manages your contacts perhaps as well. But yeah, a lot of companies do use a exchange server or similar to an exchange server. Google has their own versions as well. Exchange is super cool though. It can do a lot of great things. You've got Outlook Web Access as well, OWA, that lets you access your exchange server from outside of your network. But exchange servers, mail servers is generally what a lot of companies will use. Proxy server acts as an intermediate point between a client and a server. All right, so you can have a proxy server in your company. I'm on a computer, let's say I'm on my Mac at work there, and I want to access a website. I may be prompted for a username and password. I'm going to put my username and password in. It then queries the proxy server, which says, yep, I know what that is. I'll give you access out onto the internet. So it's essentially like a middle point for managing traffic coming in and out, authentication, security, those sort of things as well. There are also things like management or patching sort of servers as well. You can sort of group these together. There are multiple different levels within here, but things like, what could be some examples? SCCM. SCCM is a product by Microsoft for managing a fleet, for pushing out patches, for remote controlling computers, for installing software, that sort of stuff. You got things like WSUS, could be a management server, vSphere, that sort of thing, for managing your, your virtual environment could be considered a management server. So, print servers. Again, a lot of companies may have their print server be part of another server, if that makes sense. So you can have your file server act as a print server, and you can have all your printers installed in one place on your file server, and you can access all your printers from this one file server. If you've got a lot of printers, if you're in a bigger company, you've got a lot of printers, you may want to think about getting a dedicated print server to manage all of your traffic, manage all of your queues. You can install things like a follow me printing thing where you can do, scan cards to allow printers to automatically print when you scan, so it doesn't send to that printer automatically. So print servers are a big part if you're running in a bigger company. Manage 10, 20, 100, 1,000 printers all from the single repository, manages all of that load there as well. FTP servers. As the name suggests, it's a FTP server. So this is a server that can be sourced, you can be accessed out onto the internet, you could be using it for your third-party clients. So I've got, let's say I work in this one company here, and I've got my third-party company, which could be whoever sitting over here. They need to give me data. They want to send it to me, right? Instead of doing it via web, or not via web, via emails, which can be very annoying, you could have quotas on your email. So let's say you want to install, somebody wants to give me a file that's 200 gig big, 200 meg big, let's say 200 meg. You can't send that over email, for example, not normally anyway. So you could have a server set up as an FTP server. Somebody could open up an FTP client, put in the IP address, it'll then go out on the internet and then come into your FTP server. They can dump stuff onto your FTP server. You can also have SSH, SFTP to have it for secure traffic. Monitoring servers. Again, this can be broken down to many different smaller categories. So the point of a monitoring server is to, as the name suggests, to monitor your fleet, okay? So these could be things like tools that go out and manage if a server is up or not, right? So you've got 1,000 servers out on your network. How do you know those servers are not broken? How do you know that they're actually up and running and providing the services out to your business? Monitoring servers can be set up to go out and send ping commands, to check things like WMI, to check if websites are up or down, those sort of things. So it essentially just monitors your entire infrastructure to make sure that things are up and running, okay? Tools, for example, you've got SolarWinds does stuff like Orion. You've got things like Foglight, you've got PRTG, there's other monitoring sort of tools that essentially its purpose is to monitor your entire infrastructure fleet. Your servers, your routers, your switches, those sort of things. They can be set up to send out emails. Let's say I'm the IT administrator, you can send me an email to say, yep, hey, the server is not running anymore. Fix me, right? So that is the point of a monitoring server. A time server, all right? We'll also call it an NTP server. So this is a server that manages the time for your infrastructure, okay? Again, a lot of companies may have their NTP server set to be their domain controllers, for example. If you're managing a lot of requests, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of servers, and you want it separate to your domain controller, you can set up a separate time server, okay? And then you can have all of your servers pointing to this NTP server, all of your clients pointing to this NTP server, so that you can ensure that every computer on your network, every server on your network is at the exact same time, right? So it's 12:21 p.m. And 30 seconds. Every device on your network can all be set to have the exact same time to the second. What you'll find is a lot of companies aren't really too concerned about this if their times go out of whack. But if you're working, say, in a financial institution that relies on you having your time set to the millisecond, then having an NTP server is crucial. In turn, that NTP server is then set to sync up with a time somewhere out on the internet. Something like an atomic clock, something like that. There are a lot of services out on the internet that manage your time. So you can set your NTP server to talk to an NTP clock somewhere on the internet and keep in sync. In turn, every device on your network is talking to that NTP server that you are running to keep everything in sync. We've also got a KMS server. A KMS server is what is used for your licensing. So this is generally in a Microsoft sense. You've got your Windows desktops, you've got your Windows servers, you've got your Office. You may have other Windows applications like Exchange. You can have, Microsoft Link. You can have other stuff. A KMS's servers are, if that made sense, a KMS server is responsible for managing all of your licenses, all of your serial keys, all that sort of stuff, right? So instead of having 1,000 computers on your network and manually putting in the product key for each one and saying activate, you manage all that locally from one central location or multiple locations. If you have many, many devices that need querying, you can have what's called global, they're like global keys that you can import. And then all your devices go in and query against this KMS server and goes ahead and activates that software for you. So KMS servers are super cool. If you don't use them, check them out because they are very, very useful and very, very easy to manage your big fleet of serials. A protection or a virus server, virus protector server. These are servers that will manage your server fleet for protection against viruses, against spam, against Trojans, against all that sort of nasty stuff out on the internet that a lot of people want to develop for who knows what reasons, to go and infect people's computers, infect businesses, steal data, that sort of stuff. So you will have software loaded on your servers, on your desktops, on your laptops, that sort of stuff, but they're all managed from one single location or from multiple locations. You can push out updates automatically. So it's a very, very cool server to have to manage all of your virus protection stuff, all from a single location. So you got guys like Symantec, guys like McAfee, there's others out there that can do this very, very well and help you manage all of your protection from single locations. Terminal servers. These are servers that are, how can we call them? Terminal servers / remote desktop servers. These are servers that people can just go in and you have multiple people logged in at the same time. Now, a lot of these terminal servers will be generally used, say, for guys like in IT, perhaps. Other guys may need access to it. But if you want somebody to log into a server, right, you generally have license limitations. You can only log in maybe 2, maybe 3 if you include a console at the one time on a server. You can have this server set up as a terminal or remote desktops server. So you can have multiple, you can have maybe 10, 15, 20, 50 people all logging onto this one server at the same time to access their stuff, right? That is a terminal server. Certificate server. What is this used for? You may have websites out on the internet, all right? You may have internal sites using HTTPS, right? Ports 443, using other secure ports, and you want to protect them with SSL certificates, right? SSL, TLS certificates that essentially secure, encrypt your traffic, so that if let's say you've got a website talking out to the internet, it doesn't go unprotected, doesn't go in a form that anybody can just intercept and open and see. So you can have encryption keys on either end, private keys, public keys to actually protect your traffic going through, and these are all managed via certificates. A lot of guys will have certificates, they go out into their SSL labs, like there's all these companies out there that provide you certificates. So if I've got a website and I need a certificate for it, I can go and request a certificate. I will generate what's called a CSR, give them that code, they'll then go ahead and give me a certificate, I can then go and apply it to my website. What a lot of bigger guys do that have multiple websites, they can have a certificate server running locally in their network. So you can actually get all of your certificates signed by a certificate authority that you own, a certificate authority that you trust itself, done completely internally as opposed to going out and requesting it outside. Benefits, pros and cons to doing that. A lot of guys will use the certificate server for their internal traffic over secure channels, over SSL, and they'll still go out and get certificates out on the internet well, from their certificate providers, certificate authorities out in the world that are trusted for their external website. So that's another option, all right? Load balancers. You can have load balancers which are physical hardware, right? Things like an F5 is a physical load balancer, but you can also have software-based versions which would be called load balancing servers. So something like a HA proxy running, right, for example, which is a super cool piece of software, you should check it out, running can act as a load balancer server. The point of this is you've got multiple traffic, multiple people trying to access a website, for example, in your business. Instead of all going to one place, it balances the load. So, you know, query 1 comes in here, it goes to this server, query 2 comes in here, goes into this server, query 3 comes in and goes to this server. So it balances the load so that your server doesn't have multiple hits at the one time and potentially crash. Firewall servers. A lot of companies are transitioning off software-based firewalls into more hardware-based firewalls, but there's still some really cool software-based firewalls available. So Microsoft did have what's called threat management, TMG, which was available for managing all of their firewalls internally. Lets you block traffic, lets you block ports, lets you block IP addresses coming in and out. So you can have a website here, and you don't want that website to access this website, right? And you can block the ports between them. You've got the internet, you don't want the internet accessing certain things on this server. You can block certain ports, you can block the IPs, that sort of stuff. Source, destination points, you can block ports, that sort of stuff. Software ones would be something like pfSense. And finally, you've got a general big one. So I sort of did lie. There are a lot more than 20. So this last category we're gonna group as application server. Application server can be a whole range of stuff. A lot of the stuff that we've probably talked about can be even bunched into together as an application server. So application servers are anything, as the name suggests, is hosting applications. Backup servers can be application servers. You've got things like your phone, your voicemail, your service for managing your virtual servers, for managing, I don't know, what else? Your SAN, your storage, right? You can have application servers for managing that sort of stuff. So application servers are a huge, diverse bunch. You can do stuff like your ticketing software, right? So a lot of IT companies will have tools that can manage your tickets, right? So you've got a request, somebody's password's blocked, right? They log a ticket to a tool, a management tool, following an ITIL sort of guideline, and that will manage that sort of stuff. So you've got like things like ServiceNow, Manage Engine. There's a lot of cool tools out there for managing tickets. So these are all bunched in together in application servers. So that is hopefully a overview of all of the servers. I hope you found this helpful. If there are servers that I didn't list, feel free to comment, list them, let's talk about them. Let's get our knowledge bank of servers up and running, get them bigger and bigger. There's a whole heap of cool servers out there. So I hope you found this helpful and hope I gave you some tips on potential servers that you may want to use in your company. So give me a thumbs up, subscribe to Digital by Computing as well for a whole bunch of more videos. Thanks for watching.